My name is Axel Kacoutié, and you are listening to When We See Each Other.
Hello, world. My name is Nikkiesha McLeod, and you're listening to When We See Each Other, presented by Stereoactive Media. When We See Each Other is a podcast that focuses on music and art by BIPOC, queer, trans, and non-binary artists, as well as artists I've met and known for some time. This episode, we're interviewing London-based audio artist and poet Axel Kacoutié. First, we'll play a short clip from one of their pieces called The Magician. Then we'll jump right into the interview. Here we go.
In the name of all things infinite and unknowable. In the name of beginnings, endings, and the dance in between. In the name of every utterance made by every tongue, feather, and leaf. In the name of the nameless and the unseen. I call upon you. You who have been called conjurer, outcast, devil, shaman, heretic, mystic, witch, alchemist, wizard, scientist, herbalist, artist, seer, sorcerer, trickster, juju, voodoo, woke, and queer. Healer, doctor, magician. Come now from the fringes, the other side of the wall. Come show us what you see. Above, below, hidden in the open.
I remember one day walking in a forest I've never been in before and looking at the trees as if there were this new thing, like limbs growing out of the ground with arms and fingers stretched out, and I imagined stringy feet, large and brown and black, all beneath the ground. And it's as if I learned for the first time what it meant to be alive in a non-human context. And I think, in a word, that is what magic is for me. It's not about making things disappear. It's more about making the invisible visible. Magic is making things real. Realizing that everything has a pulse, everything is animate, everything is presence, where the past and future shrink and nothing else seems to matter than this giant sphere of now.
The previous clip is from a segment produced for BBC Radio 4's Shortcuts, which is a Falling Tree production.
Hi, Axel. Welcome to When We See Each Other. So great to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Tired. There's a lot going on in the world, isn't there? So like it
Oh my God. So that was like one of the things that I wanted to get into. Like, I usually make space to recognize and talk about what's happening in the world. I know you're in London, and most of the drama is happening here in the United States. But I wanted to know what your thoughts are viewing from the outside. And yeah, what are some of your general thoughts around what's happening?
there's that saying, when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold or something like that. And like there's
Mm,
watching closely. I mean, this is like January has barely finished, and the biggest news at the beginning was a kidnapping of another leader of a nation state. To now this,
yeah.
every week, like state sanctioned murders are happening, and it's just like, and also Greenland as well, Greenland, and it's only when looking up Greenland that I realized that I don't know much about Greenland, and I didn't know that I think a large, like 80+% of the population are indigenous, and I didn't know that. I just generally thought that it was a low populated islands like Antarctica or something like that, which again
Mhm.
serves this colonial justification for its occupation. But it's like, okay, Trump wants to do that, but it's also an occupied land because it's of the kingdom of another European nation. I think it's Denmark. And it's like, oh, this is, the narrative is like, oh, isn't it so bad that Trump wants to get Greenland or colonize Greenland? But it's just like, oh, wait, isn't it terrible that Greenland is occupied in itself generally anyway? So
Right.
it's just like, like there's something every day that we, or that I personally learn that informs or reframes or creates a kind of urgency as to like what is my response to this
Mm,
in a way that isn't a reactive Instagram story, but something that is a bit more sustainable in how I decide to exist on this planet in a way that feels like, hey, I'm doing something. And it's kind of like, yeah, stepping away from that instant gratification, I guess, that can often, there's a craving for that sense of it that kind of defangs or satiates this desire to feel like we're doing something, or there's a kind of traction. And yeah, just taking a step back to really take stock and think of the bigger picture. And yeah, I think it helps having two kids under the age of, one is 5 and the other is 1. And so there's a literal investment in
yeah.
reminding myself that, yeah, hey, two revolutionaries here. Like we have been, and our older generations have been conditioned to not question authority in a way, or like in a way that we have walked into this because our parents essentially, or our teachers or our parents or the police. This is kind of like mode of relating to power that has been naturalized, that
Yeah.
while trying to do the parenting in the way that challenges that, hopefully means that when they are in this world and when I am no longer here physically, that, oh no, yeah, I can question things. I feel equipped to challenge and stand up for myself and stand up and advocate for others. Little things like that. And, that's an immediate way to kind of feel like I'm quote unquote doing something. But yeah, it's just not immediate. It's just bigger picture.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like for the most part, some people are thinking about it in terms of a bigger picture
Mm.
and what we're leaving behind for the next generation to deal with.
Mm.
And I feel optimistic in that sense. But then I'm like, oh, these are just the few people that you follow on Instagram.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So it's not a true representation of like the majority of folks, you know what I mean? Um, and so it's just like, yeah, so there's definitely some kind of naivete around that in that sense. It's just like, you fool yourself, "Oh, yeah, things are gonna get better," and then you actually realize the truth, um, in terms of, like, what is happening and how much of it is much larger than you thought it was.
Yeah. And how much work there is. And it's just like, I don't know what your sun sign is, but being an Aries and having loads of Aries placements, I'm like, okay, bet this is the challenge. Okay, I understand it. It feels impossible, and it probably is, but I'm gonna burn as bright and use as much as I can to do right now, as in like the lifespan of the average lifespan of a human, to just do as much as much as I can and show up as much as I can when I can, really. Because yeah, it's the only way, and it's also the thing is like here, Europe, Britain, like this idea that, oh, we're not like America because I guess we didn't have the Klan and burning crosses on our lawns and all that kind of stuff like that. I don't know. There's this sanitized revisionist history or cultural understanding of what Britain and mainland Europe is. But there's always this kind of like neat erasure of forgetting that you guys are the grandfathers of,
Yes, exactly.
you know,
Like, you basically created all of
all of
this.
this.
You created America, and, that's the other thing too, like, I keep having to remind not only myself, but others that America was a colony.
Yeah.
So
You know,
you know what?
we're talking about imperial cause, like there's an imperial cause per se,
Yeah,
but this is, hey man, this is, yeah, grandfather genocider here. Like this is,
yeah.
so yeah, watching that closely in the States, I'm like, yeah, and Britain is quietly doing the same stuff. It's just in a different way, but it's the same stuff. So like, yeah, how to make sure that, yeah, we're clued up. Yeah. So yeah, man, there's a lot of motivation and hope. Honesty as well, and being tired, but also at the same time, you know what? There's a reason to get out of bed. Yeah. Yeah. Ripples.
And you brought up hope. That's another thing that I usually ask, like, guests on the show, about hope, which interestingly, your piece, Paradise, discusses hope as a response to Emily Dickinson's poem,
Mm,
Hope is the Thing with Feathers.
yeah.
And that also made me think about this quote by Miriam Kiba, Hope is a Discipline.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, so I wanted to know what inspired Paradise and how do you practice hope and experience joy?
Mm, wow. That nuance of experiencing joy and hope, like I didn't realize that they were two separate relatives as opposed to like being mashed up together as one thing. Like, to feel hopeful maybe is to feel joyful as well. But actually, and so to answer that question about, yeah, in the hope part of that question, I'm reminded of James Baldwin and how he says that he can't be a pessimist because he's alive. I'm alive, we're alive. That means something.
Right.
Like we as people, as the consciousness that we have, we find meaning in things, and help guiding people to find meaning is inspiring. Connecting with people to feel less alone through my practice, like quite often my practice overall is to say, hey, I'm noticing something. Am I the only one? I
Mm,
don't think I am, because I've
mm.
done this enough to know that I'm not. But every time I try to do something, it's just like, I really hope I'm not the only one. And again, Jimmy says something about how, like, you think you're the only person to experience this thing, and then you read and you realize that not only is that you were the only one, it's just like, actually, this has been repeating. It's been rhyming, like it's, and there's a lot of comfort in that. There's a lot of comfort in that. And I think, as of late, my hope has been understanding ancestral work is the best way to put it.
Mm.
Understanding the legacies, the inheritance of resistance is something that gives me so much hope, actually, because it's every time I learn something about African resistance, whether in the creation and construction of what we now call the Western world. Like it's I keep saying, it's like, of course we fought back. Of course we fought back at every
Yeah.
single junction. Of course we did. But like there's
Right.
this like there's this unlearning, this miseducation that has been carried with us and that has conditioned us to believe otherwise. And I understand why, like it's extremely dangerous to have a conscious Black person. It is fundamentally the antithesis of the existence of Western civilization is a conscious Black person. And that's not even an exaggeration, because the reliance on our ignorance is what sustains the necessary violence to function as this society that we all benefit from. And there's so much evidence of that on both sides of the pond, of that, of the violent suppression of knowledge, or it will be like the trivialization of it. It was like, oh, you're a hotep-based or Afrocentric, that, like all these kind of like negative connotations of like learning your history. It's all by design. But yeah, like I've been reading a lot, like my coming to Virginia for the Resonate Festival. That in itself is a story, but it connected my interest and fascination with the Haitian Revolution in a way that surprised me. Essentially, there was a African burial ground that was where a blacksmith called Gabriel, he was executed for his planning and his insurrection. And this was in 1800. And he said that he was inspired, as many people in Virginia was inspired by the uprising in what then became known as the Haitian Revolution.
Right.
And for me, it's just like, raw, like in Virginia, like they knew about it then, from, like the way the word spread. And then after that, doing a lot more research, there was this concept called the common wind, and there's a whole book by that. And it really describes how the enslaved Africans in Jamaica had ways to communicate with Dominicans, and this is like, and you'd have records from slavers who'd be like, how did they know this before we did? And I just found that it's like in those times, like, this is before the internet, like this was before, and it's just like, I just find that's like, like we're living in this age of surveillance now where, we're careful. We have to be careful about what we say and those consequences. It's just, I guess the what I find so inspiring and so hopeful is like, yeah, we've been here before. The idea of organizing, the threat of immediate violence and death felt a bit distant, but I think it's a bit closer now, and probably closer to how our ancestors may have known it to be, i.e., you say a wrong word and you literally become a spectacle in a very real, immediate way. But they did it. They because what were your options? What and
they did it.
Yeah, so I find that really hopeful. So like looking to the past and understanding that the past is a blueprint for the future, that they aren't behind us, they are waiting for us, because they fought for. This is how I take it, like and I guess being a parent as well now also helps me frame it in this way, that it reminds me of that saying of planting a seed for a tree that you're never actually going to see. I find that quite liberating, to know that there is a legacy of we are the trees of the seeds that were planted. They did not know what we were going to become and be, but it's not over. It's not over because it's still going. There's a continuum here. And so, yeah, I take that very seriously. I take that, it's a very inspiring thing to understand that we are, until we're all free, the struggle continues, and the struggle has been, I find it very beautiful. So, and it gives me joy. It gives me joy. It gives me joy as well, because it's in the blood. It feels like there's something inherent, and like I'm asking better questions to the things that I'd like to know. Yeah, I think I know who I'm asking more, who I need to ask to find the questions. And basically it's like, ancestors, and especially my grandma. She recently passed, and I'm like,
oh no.
Yeah, and this is like,
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It was around the time my second son was born as well, and so that's the whole balance of life and death was a very interesting thing. And then that became a thing of like, you know what? Yeah, and she's my only link my main link to back home in Cote d'Ivoire, and that being gone, they say like, yeah, when an elder passes, it's like a whole library that goes kind of thing, and you feel that. And so like understanding that wealth and like understanding of this, I feel closer to her now than I did before when she was across over there, basically. Which is such an interesting thing to say and experience. But yeah, that's another way that gives me hope, because the link is still there, the connection is still there, and
Right.
it's like, hey, okay, yeah, there's work to do, but there are many forces at work here, and I want to align.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed In Paradise. The ending lines pretty much represents a little bit about what you were saying, and then also the essence of that piece. And I'm just gonna read it because I really felt this, like really, really felt it. Hope doesn't often come with trumpets, and change isn't always an earthquake. It can be subtle, quiet enough. And this was it, a gentle push from a new wind under a cool light of sun beaming through a fog, promising a better way. Oh my God, just so beautiful. My God, that totally uplifted me.
Wow.
Like, seriously. Like, I was just like, oh,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. It's been a minute since I've touched that. So hearing that back is like, wow, I said that.
Yes, you did. Oh my God, you so did. And it moved another human being. So,
Yeah. I don't know.
kudos.
I really appreciate that, and I think it's one of those things sometimes that you write the things that you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that similar response to hope is a thing with feathers. That poem in itself, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when I think I come back to that thing, it's like, yeah, I can't be a pessimist because I'm alive, and that
Right.
being alive feels like what the feathers are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gives me hope to keep going, because
Yeah.
you look at the wrong thing, one can understand why. It's just like, you know what, I'm out of here. I don't want to do this, but there are very easy examples to subscribe to that. But yeah, I think right now it's just like, no, we're here, so that's got to mean something.
Yeah. Your whole idea of pessimism reminded me of something that I've been saying to myself since 2024. Despair is expensive, and I've seen what despair has done, and it is very expensive. And when I say expensive, I'm not talking about monetary like things. I'm talking about the human soul. I'm talking about life, living, actually living and existing. It can cost you that.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. What is the backstory of how you ended up being a sound engineer and poet? Like, what inspired you to get into this field?
The short answer is it was all by accident.
I love that.
It's like, hey, I studied to write music and I had the ambition, to write music for television, films, world building in a musical way. At the time, Hans Zimmer was all the rage, and he was like all his soundtracks up until that point, from 2010 to 2013. So at that point, it was just like, hey, okay, I'm studying this course, I'm doing this thing. This is the one time where, hey, like all the industry folks are here, like really just like give them a show. Like, it was in between all of that where like privately I was writing poems and kind of soundscaping things and like putting music to that and building worlds in that way. But like that was like kind of like my own little my little secret I shared with some friends and of course people romantic interests at the time. But yeah, I didn't think much of that beyond that. But yeah, what paid the bills during uni and after uni was working at a radio station, developing those skills there. And working at a radio station was like I'm seeing people produce shows in real time, and I'm starting to understand, hey, this is also a kind of storytelling that they're doing.
Right.
This is interesting. I think I can do this for a bit. Okay, I think I can actually stay here. As in, like, this is interesting enough for me to stay here and not want to leave to try and find another job. This is good enough to pay the bills whilst I still try and pursue this music career. And then it wasn't until then working at The Guardian and the response to how I was treating the stories through sound design and selecting the music and writing the music and stuff like that, that it's like, oh, okay, people are really responding to this. Okay, I think maybe I should do this some more. And then after that and doing that some more, I wrote my first shortcuts piece and with Falling Tree Productions. And that then led on to a Third Coast Award. And I was like, oh, this is what? Like that's how I write privately for myself when I'm figuring out, basically there was a whole vulnerability that I didn't think, could be received in such a way, especially using my words rather than hiding behind my music to try and do the same thing.
Right.
And so I started stepping out a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And the response was, really, I mean, just as yourself right now, reading my words back to me, it's just like, and how you said that moved you, that happened and happened and happened and happened and encouragement. And yeah, this is how our paths are now crossing, where that happens enough where, yeah, I'm saying yes to the invitations people make from me speaking from the heart. I think there's another way of saying that, but essentially, yeah, how people respond to my vulnerabilities, I'd say yes to that because it feels sincere. You can kind of trust that. And of course there are, hit and misses and, the odd cowboy here and there. But I think for the most part, my experience has been, overwhelmingly positive and beautiful and something that, I want to keep doing in some way, shape or form. But yeah, that's how it was. It was all by accident and the storytelling and it thrust upon me in many ways because I was like, hey, I've got this little thing. I hope you like it. And then people did like it. And that was a to and fro with that.
So do you remember the first thing you ever created in terms of like, combining the two, audio with poetry?
Yeah, there was a project and I called it The Allegory of Youth. And it was a small collection of poems, mainly around the subject of love, romantic love. But yeah, there's one track I still really like that poem. It's called Upon My Skin. And the way the poem flows in a very kind of like Edgar Allan Poe kind of way, along with, I remember how much I was in flow when writing that track, specifically with the music and how that all came out in one sitting almost. Both the writing separately and then after that the music to accompany that. I was like, yes. And then after that, I worked with a director. We shot a film poem that I needed to get a life-size horse mannequin for it because we were recreating a painting, which is a line in the poem. It's called Frenzy of Exaltations. And it is a white redhead woman on a black horse, which at the time I was drawn to it. But at the time I was just like, I didn't know why. There's a lot of symbolism and connotations in that I was just like, now that I look back at it, it's like, that is an interesting thing to be drawn to. But nonetheless, it was, it was fun to kind of like bring to life that painting. And yeah, so that project as a whole was kind of like an EP for this is what Axel can do, and collaborate and work and stuff like that. And yeah, that was very fun. And it's still a touchstone. There's still a point I look back on and I was like, yeah, it'll be good to do something like that again in some way.
Yeah. So what is your approach? Like your approach to creating, your process of creating? I know it seems like, at least what I basically experienced from listening to all of your work, it seems like it definitely starts with the basics of curiosity.
Yeah.
But then, like, what is it? What do you do? Do you walk around with a notebook and you just, write down certain things? or you had an experience that was just like so profound that you had to explore it further in your own way. So if you can tell us about your process of creating, that would be great.
Yeah. I will use existing examples to just help anchor it as well. There's a through line, but it's kind of like, so with How to Remember, for example, that started the first line that we hear in that, you don't know what it means to be Black because you don't know what it means to be one thing. That I wrote, I think that came out in 2019. I wrote that line 3 years before, when I was in Vietnam, and there was this little kid trying to sell me something, and I I said no and stuff like that, but he still lingered, and he looked at me and he says like, "When I grow up, I want to be as dark as you." And I was just like, that is in that context as well. Like there were a lot of anti-Black experiences that just weren't nice. But then I felt like having a kid so sincerely say that he wanted to be as dark as me just spun me in a way. It's just like, where am I? What is going on here?
Right.
And it's just like the fluxness of what this body and skin color can mean to so many people at different times. I don't know what that means. And so that was the beginning of like, hey, I'm gonna unpack that. But that question stayed with me. I did not know how to develop that. And then so when Eleanor McDowell was like, hey, do you have, this is the theme for the episode called Self-Portraits. Do you have something that feels aligned to that? It's like, well, rewind 3 years ago, this was a question I never really fully unpacked. So I'm now using these 3 months to unpack a question that I never found the courage to answer. I think a lot of my process is finding the courage to either answer or explore the things I'm too scared to say because I know it's going to change me.
Right.
And it's change, yes, it can be subtle. And quite often, like, I don't realize it's changed me until I have completed a thing.
Right.
And that's when I'm like, irreversibly, it's like, oh, wow, this is the point of no return. How to Remember was like that. Gatekeeper was also like that. Just as I was like, oh, okay, so we did one thing about identity in a racial sense, but actually now, oh, wait, no, I'm having questions about this whole gender thing here. This isn't like, what is that about? But I still,
And we'll get to Gatekeeper.
okay. But it was just like, but I didn't want it to be purely around pronouns and wherever and toilets, essentially. And being an African person, I know I am not, this isn't like a Western import or corruption.
Right.
This, like, I can't fake this. This isn't resonating. What's going on here? And so there I was kind of like, again, starts with that question, starts with that curiosity. But also finding the courage to then, and also in the collaborative sense, to be like, hey, there are other people who have answered more questions. I was about to say who are ahead of me, but no, they just answered more questions or have dared to express themselves in a way that I admire or feel like I'm not ready to do yet. Maybe, I don't know. This is the joy about existing in many ways and expressing yourself in many ways. It's not competition. But anyway, so it's that daring to answer that question that I fear once I answer it, there's no going back.
Right.
But then after that, with Etche Homo, for example, which is a whole audio drama around this idea of being human. And this was in response to witnessing people asking, where's the humanity? Where's the humanity? And like, again, Black person here is like, I don't know, like, what is being human anyway? Like, there's all of this rules-based order thing is just like, I'm not vibing with it. And at that point now, I have been put off by wanting to, quote unquote, be factual and tell the truth, because every time I did, there were some people who would say that it's not true. And you can easily imagine the people who may have a thing to say about me talking about my experience as a Black person and them denying that. Basically a lot of white people were like, actually, or that's not true, or are you sure? And so that side of it, white noise, that just reminded of white noise, is a response to that. Like, so often there'll be, yes, there's curiosity, but also there's another side of it where either I want to be playful or this is my audio middle finger to the people who are just like either like pissing me off or like are just gaslighting me in a way that I reject.
Right.
And then after that, I was reminded of a quote that art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. I was like, yes, that
Mhm.
is in the face of capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy.
Right.
If you are comfortable in that,
Hmm.
like I need to shake you, I need to move you. And the idea to disturb someone, I think a lot about like what clowns do and what fools do, in the sense of like there's a kind of consenting, ritualistic, and what jazz does actually,
Hmm.
jazz does the same thing. Like there's a real polarizing response to jazz. It's like, oh, this isn't music, for example. It's like, have you tried fucking playing
Right. Exactly.
anything
Exactly.
called it jazz?
Right.
And like having a musical background, I mean, just like it's such oh man, bebop as well,
Yeah.
specifically
Yep.
bebop as well. There's a reason why jazz is still used as a technology to represent the future
Right.
in many ways, because there's something in what that does. And again, like, yeah, the African legacy of that,
Right.
like, it's just, I, I'm, there's so much in that, but it disturbs us in a way. And disturbing isn't a negative thing. It's just simply, it's like there's a still water.
Right.
Hey, sometimes still waters, there's funky things that live in that water that's arguably, like you don't drink from a still lake, you drink from a river. You need movement.
Yeah.
And in that way, yeah, I really think that there's a really strong ambition for my work now, because there's a lot of compliments of like, hey, your work is really beautiful, it's really meaningful, and don't get me wrong, I need that. That
Mm.
is still something I need to hear. But in the face of everything that's going on, I want to do both. I want to be beautiful and ugly. I realize that in a lot of my work, there's a lot of shouting in it too. And in fact, I want to lean more into that now in whatever works that manifest in the future,
Mhm.
because I feel like that we need to. I want to disturb. I find that so liberating to say that I want to disturb you. If you are
Yeah.
seeing Axel's name with a piece of work, whether it's audio, written, or something like that, I feel like I would have failed if there is not some sense of movement that has happened. So yeah, that's been the trajectory there of like beautiful, vulnerable things, and also like audio middle fingers and punches in the face now.
I think for the most part, that just goes into the next question that I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
The piece magician, that totally relates to what you were just saying. And it makes sense, the analogy that you're making, that artists are magicians. I've always felt that way, and I think it's really relevant. But I actually want you to talk a little bit more about that, to speak more on the viewpoint around what makes someone a magician, even though you did in the piece itself. But let us all hear it
Yeah, no.
and hear why you chose this particular aspect,
Mm,
where it came from, like what inspired you to think in this way.
okay. So what inspired me with the magician? I'm really into my astrology and tarot, and symbolism and stuff like that. There's, in one sense, numerology. There's something about how you add the date, the numbers in your birthday, um, and what that then numerologically comes down to is usually a number between 1 and 9, and 1 is the magician. And that's also for me, you add up the numbers in my birthday, it's the number 1. And so that has a particular resonance and alignment there. Also at the time, I kind of rejected it because I found in my work, I'm often called a wizard, and I'm also called like, oh, what you're doing is magic. But I didn't really embrace it because I saw in the capitalist framing where your labor is extracted, I felt that that was a compliment to essentially keep me sweet, to keep extracting from me. I found it
Mm.
dehumanizing, frankly, to be called these things, because the nature of the process of producing these things just meant that, like, it's like people often forget the sound person at the end, and it was always, it's not as considered in the way that I would have liked. So then after that, when I'm able to save there, I saw it in a kind of better way of like, hey, I'm able to turn whatever you throw at me into gold, but I would rather you not throw shit at me, essentially. We can make the goal together in a more collaborative way instead of just like, whatever. So that was the kind of context of like rejecting that sense of being a magician. But then after that, yeah, it was just like, no, but I do like the symbol. The archetype is there. I do enjoy magic. And again, it became with a question like, what is really magic? And quite often when you describe magic, and funny enough as well, when you in a searching, like looking into like what genderqueer folks in indigenous populations, they are often described as that medium as well that you would typically call in a Western context a magician. It's like, okay, there's two things here that feel very aligned and stuff like that. Let me just dig into it a bit more. And it, essentially, an artist, a magician, a queer person. There's a lot of there's a lot of similar, there's a lot of crossovers here. And it's just kind of like, if I were to write on paper who the attributes or things that matter to me, put that on paper, and then you look side and you were to compare it with what's often expected in a societal way or in a cultural way, what a magician, a clown, an artist does. It's like, it's all of those things. So like for me, it's just like, okay, I'm kind of seeing these realizings as a sign that actually, instead of running from it, let me embrace it. Let me sit in it. And so that opening invocation of like, in the name of all things, that's, oh my gosh, I'll find it and read it properly, because that's one of my favorite things I've written. But yeah, I really like that. And it felt like, actually, this is a prayer for me to embody and recontextualize my practice whenever I feel like I'm doing something meaningful. Of course, but still also to have fun. It was like a magician knows how to laugh at people and have fun, and also challenge authorities and undermine existing social norms. I think that that is the reason why wizards and magicians and witches have all been persecuted at some point in any civilization, because they've been able to challenge that the lie of, or the fiction of whatever we have decided to be like, this is how we're going to organize as a society. And quite often a shaman, a wizard, a magician, they are found on the fringes. The queer person is found on the fringes. Like everything that I'm like interested in is on the fringes. So it's just like, I may as well just live there. Like that is my home. That is my space. And yeah, that's what the magician is about. And kind of like challenging that kind of infantilization of it, the Orientalism in a Western context, as to why we don't take magic seriously in the mainstream, general, unthinking way. If you were to engage and ask thoughtful questions to most people afterwards, it's like, why don't you think so? Well, then why do you think the economy is real? And if you think it's actually like 1:00 in the morning, someone has decided that, and you have all believed that. Money, like what the hell? Like it's like nothing is real. Stop trying to make it sound like you're more intelligent than me, because I believe that the force, just on one thing of like the sun, how far, like Jupiter is closer to us than the sun is. But whenever the sun comes out, how do you feel? That is the sun. Now, Jupiter, that is closer to us, you're telling me that's not going to have an influence? We all know that the moon has an influence. We all know, like, come on, guys. Let's just accept it. We are a part of this everything. We are a part of everything, and so everything affects us. From someone else's mood to the sun, and there have been people who have been able to study those patterns and help us navigate the world. And yeah, we call them magicians, we call them artists, we call them gay people, we call them, I don't know, anything and everything in between. But yeah, that's the vibe for a magician.
Well, it totally reminded me of something, that the truth is uncomfortable. So that's probably why.
That's right.
That's probably why we tend to ignore the things that are really true and that's in front of us, because then it'll make us question ourselves and what we know of ourselves and how we see ourselves. So yeah, which just brings me to gatekeeper. So, okay, my mind exploded listening to this piece, as, it depicts a non-romantical experience of queerness and being trans and non-binary. It reminded me of my own experience and how I knew from a very young age that I didn't neatly fit as man or woman. And I also, felt like, this other piece, a mother tongue, kinda connected with gatekeeper in terms of the use of language and how language is a tool and it is a part of our identity. And the reason that I bring that up is because non-binary and trans are words that only recently became what we call people who are like this and have been existing like this since the beginning of humanity.
That's right.
So that connection between the language and then also the terminologies that we're using now, and it also reminded me of what you were saying in terms of Neptune, and how, in fact, Neptune existed long before we discovered it. We discovered,
That's right.
it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, and the fact of the matter is, just because it doesn't have a language or it's not labeled or whatever, it doesn't mean that it does not exist. So yes, I can go on. I want you to go on and tell us everything, all of the tea. Give us all of the tea behind gatekeeper.
Oh, wow. Gatekeeper, that it was such a special, special um thing to bring to life. I first want to just start off by saying rest in peace to Dr. Miles Owusu. He passed away last year, and it was such a it was him that introduced me to the book, The Spirit of Intimacy, and I think that's part of the real joy of the process of being honest and vulnerable and be like, hey, this is where I'm at, and I don't have all the answers. I don't want to have all the answers. In fact, I'm inviting you with I like how you ask questions. Can you ask questions with me? And Mel's did that so beautifully. And yeah, I had one idea of what this piece was going to be before starting it, and it just changed. And I remember when making it, the idea of what a gatekeeper is in it's the same thing that's happening now. Like there's a moment in when I was at my desk mixing that I felt portals opening, and in a way that it's like, you know what, when there are signs that you are doing something that feels aligned with what needs to be said, there are undeniable subtle things that just give you that thumbs up to say like keep going. Because what I realized in the process is like, hey, working in audio is a kind of necromancy in the sense that we are honoring the dead, the voices of the unheard. And when we're doing a mother tongue, and I remember when speaking the names of the languages that I would never know, in Ivory Coast, for example, because I only know French and English, that felt like I was calling a presence, and every time that's played, that's what felt quite powerful with that. It's just like on the airwaves of the BBC, being able to represent my heritage in that way has kind of immortalized, was kind of like in the ripples of eternity in a more material way compared to that in a more, it's like one level down from the subtle spiritual, you got the radio waves. And it felt like that. And with Gatekeeper, it's the same thing. It's like I am talking to people who represent communities around the world that show us that Neptune has always been a thing, that we have always existed, and it felt so much bigger than me, and felt so right for me to also speak on it. That it's It's deep. It's deep. It's deep. And it's so funny that you connected a mother tongue with Gatekeeper, because I like to think it's so funny that you said that, because in my head there's a trilogy. How to Remember is part one, Mother Tongue is the second installment, and Gatekeeper's the third. And yeah, it's really interesting that you were able to make that through line with those two pieces, because it's language, how language informs all of that is part of the reason why I think that speaks to this idea of like not wanting it to just be about pronouns and toilets, because
Right.
that's a relatively recent thing, and like it's and an unimportant thing, frankly.
Right.
Even when
Yeah.
I understand how I present myself. I like my beard. I like my voice, for example. So if I am quote unquote misgendered in a way that, and that's, yeah, it's just like, I get why you have. I have told you and I'll remind you.
Right.
And I know that it's deeper for me.
Mhm.
Um, in because it's kind of like non-binariness is the fact. It's just like there's just so much in the decision every day to be comfortable in my body is something that I want to practice. This idea of like being perceived as a man is something I want to undermine, but like is how, is it through my clothes or is it through what I say?
Mhm.
Is it how I express myself?
Mhm.
Like that, and I how I then remember is that, hey, there are non-Western ways of expressing that
Right.
actually is part of the reason why we think men are men and women are women, is
Right.
because colonialists saw all of that and was like, no, we got to double down in
Right.
our gender expressions now, because what the fuck is all of this?
Yeah.
Essentially, is what Columbus said and
Yeah.
all these Christian missionaries said. Um, and so, yeah, like coming back to, and that's why, like, yeah, like for me, there is that spiritual, there is the magic, because magic is queerness. Being an artist there's nothing straight about being an artist to me, because it's inherently subverts and questions all these things, and that in the face of a cis heteronormative patriarchal capitalist society, to ask a question is to is the beginning of a queerness that um is the beginning of a queerness, shall we say. And yeah, Gatekeeper really, I was just really happy to just discover more about queerness and non-binariness in Africa, to be honest,
Mm.
because I think there's such a major wound from that Christian colonial
Mhm.
impact of believing that it's like, hey, this is a Western thing, this is a white people thing.
Right.
It's like, I express myself how I want to express myself. You can't fake that.
Right.
And if that exists, it means that, what does that mean if that exists? Like, you're not copying. I'm not copying anyone.
Right.
Like, this is,
Exactly.
so yeah, like the evidence is there, the tea is there. And there are many wonderful lights that represent this fact every day, and I long to the hope. The hope is to be one of those as well.
Yeah. So, like another aspect of Gatekeeper that came up for me was how colonialism means not only the separation of self, but from the land, but also the disassociation of the body from self and having bodily autonomy, essentially. So it's not only the colonialization of the land, but also the human body, right? So can you talk more about how queerness basically decolonializes everything?
Big question there. Shit. I will do my best from my perspective of wanting to comfort the disturbed. Colonialism, how I understand it or how I perceive it from coming from a colonized land, um, is it like you kind of have to, by force and violence and repetition, you start to believe the fictions that they enforce on you. It's. I think what I am realizing is that, yeah, I think okay, I'm going to answer it from this perspective. Like, the threat of violence is part of the reason why we conform in the way that we do, essentially. Whether it's the threat from a parental perspective, corporal punishment, or beatings, frankly, the violence of poverty because you have spoken up, and therefore, because you have spoken out, you lose a job and you can't pay the bills, and we're all an accident or some kind of opinion away from homelessness or worse. These things came from somewhere, mainly Europe, and because of that, questioning things, they like to question is to immediately put yourself at risk, because there are so many forces at work, which I think as a magician, to recognize these invisible forces, is part of being a magician, because your craft means that you're able to see when other people are doing it. Storytellers aren't all radical leftists. You have conservative storytellers who corrupt original stories to tell their versions of it, to justify their violent oppressive ways. And so it's just kind of like, I kind of see that as like, yeah, two magical forces, the decision to succumb to our fears and the decisions to work with our aspirations. And yeah, colonialism plays. So questioning that, I start with myself. If I question myself, I think that feels like the safest playground to then expand into, like, hey, if I feel like this, more people must be feeling like this. If I don't like going to work, you must not like going to work.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong, but if I'm wrong, why am I wrong? Let me put a microphone in front of the people who say that I'm wrong. Let me put a microphone in front of the people who can say better why it is wrong or why it is right. And so, yeah, it's a very simple thing to say that, to question is to queer things. But to question, there's a sense of normalcy, a continuity that's designed that I say that we accept, but I don't think we accept consciously, because again, once you start questioning these things, you start to think, that's not quite right. In the same way that, when we're browsing on the internet and using Google Chrome, for example, like, if someone were to say to you to your face, hey, do you want to come into the shop? But if you do, we are monitoring you every single moment. And everything that you buy, we have the right to take back from you. You're not going to step into the shop, but that's what Google does all the time. But they dress it up in convenience, for example. But the moment you start questioning, it's like, why do you want my data? They don't want you to ask that, because they want you to use the stuff. So they're going to make it fun and gamify it and work and stuff like that. And so you inherently then just become, you become a problem the more you start questioning. And yeah, like, I think, there's a great legacy of folks who question and who queer, whether in a social sense or in a sexual sense or in however you want to describe it, but just a deviate from the norm. To question is to deviate, and that's the link between the two there.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah. Totally agree. Oh my God. Like, seriously. I just, like, I'm overwhelmed by all of it, honestly, when you bring up the fact that for our privacy being on the chopping board. I don't even know where to begin. And so if it's like that for me, then it most likely is like that for a lot of people. And including mostly too, like, I'm thinking about the most vulnerable of us
Yeah.
in terms of this, like, our older parents, people who are disabled.
Yeah.
So it's just, but not to jump into another story of things that we want to discuss. But yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But okay, so the other thing that I wanted to bring up in terms of, like, gatekeeper is, like, going back to language and how it is connected to your identity. You mentioned that your pronouns are they, them, but you would prefer your name instead of pronouns.
Mm,
Can you go into why? I mean, I kind of understand why, but I want
yeah.
people who are listening to understand why. And that it also reminded me of why our renaming of ourselves is so huge. And how that is also a part of like queering things up and also decolonializing things as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I recently learned that the concept of a surname is another colonial import for surveillance, frankly.
Mhm.
I guess in a colonial context, because of course you had people whose surnames are like Blacksmith or Smith and this, because it's like given name and occupation, essentially, or occupation of your father, or whose clan you belong to, etc., etc.
Mhm.
But I believe in the African context, at the very least, naming systems were very different, but surnames became an administrative thing to essentially emulate their oppressors, and that's the reason why, yeah, surnames exist. And it's interesting, yeah. If I call you by anything other than Nikki, for example, you may not even raise your head. You may not
Mhm.
even look up. If someone calls me Axel, I know they're talking to me. If he could be anyone, they could be anyone. And I may not know that. Yeah, I guess I appreciate directness. I appreciate the invitation to be addressed directly, and I think there's an invitation for that kind of openness, intimacy that, frankly, honestly, I crave that, and I think a name does that so much more than anything else. There's a reason why names and there's a reason why there are naming ceremonies, and there's a reason why it takes like 7 days before deciding, hey, this is the name of our child, and this is what they're gonna bring to our community. I remember even, with both my children, we fought long and hard about it. Like my partner's Iranian and myself is Ivorian, so it's like, okay, there are two worlds here
Mm.
that we want to represent, and we agreed that it's like, because a lot of our parents' generations gave us names, anglicized names, Latinized names
Mm.
for the sake of assimilation and safety.
Right. Right.
And for us, we decided that we're not going to do that as a way to preserve the heritage that they have in this world that they're going to navigate. Which Lord knows what that's going to look like when they are of age or adults. But at least through their names, you will have people from either side would be like, yeah, hey, what? I know that name. Like, do you know that name? And they will be like, yeah, I do know that name. Like, whether it's to an Ivorian or to an Iranian, they would know, they will be able to essentially rep their set, like this is like they know themselves, they know where they come from. And I think that's so, and I think I recently thought about this last week, this idea of, like, frankly, and the Gatekeeper speaks on our disconnect from the earth, our disconnect from ourselves. It's one of the
Right.
grave
Right.
reasons why we're seeing such great, like such behavior that I don't know if humanity or we as a species have ever seen this before, but we're seeing this now. And like my real fear is that, hey, like, we need to like, who are we accountable to?
Right.
And like, like, invisibilizing this idea of a sky god compared to Mother Earth, for example. It means, like,
Mm.
if
Mhm.
the way we organize as a society was actually, if I take too much from this plot of land, I'm going to go hungry in the next coming months. Therefore, I'm going to adjust my behavior. We are going to adjust our behavior for a more sustainable way. I don't think we'll be. I don't like the industrialized murder that we're doing wouldn't be such a priority if we understood that food scarcity could be a thing if we overfarm this plot of land. And I say all of that, and it's the same thing, like the idea of seeing myself as a child of this earth. Yes, I come from a mother who birthed me, but like, who am I? I'm a child of this earth. Like, I feel like that's the one thing that I can hold on to, that our children can hold on to. When I say our children, I mean like whether you are a parent or not, like these are everybody's kids.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like
Yeah.
they're literally going to be looking after us, wiping our asses when we're gone, whether or not that you are a parent or not. So like it's just like, yeah, so a name does that. A name connects us to a place. And when you're connected to a place, literally that's the word grounding, isn't it? Like the metaphor of feeling stable is a metaphor for the place that we actually live on. Like it's
Yeah.
you know, and yeah, that's the one constant here. We live on this planet, and I know it sounds rude, but it's true. That's the way I started to say it now. Like it's rude, but it's true. Like you can't debate it, and that, it's been disparaged, even questioning that, like, why is it frowned upon to say that we are of this earth, and why
Right.
we socialize to think that's a cheesy, stupid thing to
Yeah.
say? Like,
It's back to that separation of yourself from the land.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
And when the moment you're separate, you become homeless. And if you're homeless,
Right.
you're gonna move reckless. You are gonna
Yeah.
move reckless because nothing belongs to you. If you know that something belongs to you, you're gonna look after it.
Totally. So thinking about your influences, I'm really curious which artists you get compared to the most and whether you appreciate those comparisons. Also, is there anyone who influences you that you think people would find surprising?
Oh, okay. I'm gonna start with that last question first. Who people would find surprising? That is a good question. That is a really good question. It's funny because like I just make assumptions like, of course it would be this because it's in my head, but actually maybe if I say I've never tested this before, but I have realized that I do listen to a lot of heavy metal
Ah,
and
yes.
gothic stuff. So then when I talked about, oh, I like screaming, or I've noticed there's a lot of screaming in my work, then I remember that I listened to a lot of Slipknot, for example. It's like, oh,
Mm,
okay, yeah, that makes sense for me. That could be surprising for others, but it's like, it's so everything to me, as in it's so part of me that I haven't stepped back to be like, oh yeah, that could be perceived as a surprise. But yeah, I listen to a lot of intense, expressive music in that sense. Music that um, is also very, there's, I guess, one, if I say I listen to a lot of Lupe Fiasco, and that kind of conceptual work, that he's done, his work has saved my life in so many ways. So has Linkin Park in that instance. But then after, there's another band called Cradle of Filth. And what they like growing up Catholic and then hearing metal songs that could be categorized as blasphemous, that really did
mhm,
something for me. And just like, oh
mhm.
shit, you can say that. That idea of like you can say that
Yes.
was very exciting for me. And I feel like
Mhm,
that informed something to be like, oh yeah, I can say that. Um, yeah, that did a lot. Um, but yeah, I mean, I mentioned this James Baldwin already, but I see him as a mentor.
mhm,
Um, yeah, man, his work, his essay, The Artist Struggle for Integrity. It was originally The Artist Struggle for his integrity, but yeah, The Artist Struggle for Integrity. I come back to on a quarterly basis because the way he lays out the artistic realizing, um, from growing up to realizing they're different to then realizing that courage is a constant practice. It's not like so
mhm.
and so is brave. It's like so and so is deciding to be brave today. They may not be tomorrow. They may not be next year. It may come around again, but that was a brave thing they did. And I find that a lot. I find that much more manageable in terms of like, this is how I'm showing up today, rather than this is who I am always, because I'm not. I'm not. I remember listening to a Robert Glasper album a couple of weeks ago, and I realized it came out in 2012, and it was such a blast from the past. When you listen to a song, it takes you back to exactly who you were back then. And like, I really thought I figured it all out. I really knew that I knew who I was when I was listening to that album, but no, 8 years later, I did the math. I was like, wow, that is not a long time, and I don't think that would, I'd be recognizable to that Axel, which is great. I love that. So yeah, those are like influences like from metal to James Baldwin to Lupe Fiasco to genres, new metal, and hip hop and classical music and soundtracks. And then after that, a lot of kids sound design, like anime sound design, I realize has influenced me a lot. Cartoon Network has influenced me a lot. Just in terms of the aesthetics, like working on the Empire City series, I realized that there's a lot of trip hop and drum and bass stuff. Those aesthetics influenced the palette for the series, musically speaking, anyway. And again, there's a scream in there that reminds me of Courage the Cowardly Dog. And then after that, so that was the influence. But I think I answered both of them. I think there was the surprise, maybe metal, but
Yeah, that may be a surprise for some, but it's not a surprise for me, honestly.
Interesting.
Because I mean, I listen to metal too, and I also listen to a lot of what you mentioned, and and then also like some of the artists that I've interviewed on the show, who you would definitely not think listen to metal, do listen to metal. So I'm kind of not surprised. It's just like,
Amazing. See,
it's so good.
yeah,
It's so good.
honestly, then you realize that, oh shit, this is black music too. I was like,
Yes,
reclaiming
exactly.
that. Thank you.
Yes,
Um,
definitely claim it. Definitely
yes.
claim it. So I know you mostly work through audio. Have you thought of coming out with a book of poems, essays, or a novel, or all of the above?
All of the above.
Yes.
I have a working idea of like fiction, both fiction and nonfiction. The thing that's exciting me the most in the nonfiction aspect is a kind of a survey of how Europe colonized itself. I think there was one of Fela Kuti's sons was talking about how we talk about I forgot which one it was. That's why I'm just saying his son, but it went viral as well, and it was like we talk about free Palestine, we talk about free Congo and that, but actually we need to also talk about free Europe. Free Europe from commercial interests, and this is like, oh my gosh, it's so true, because of course, like in a pre-Christian context, like anyway, this is a wonderful rabbit hole in terms of understanding how from empire, the Roman Empire, from the Romanization to the Christianization to then the corporatization of Europe, and the ongoing colonization of Europe. And there are so many moments in history that kind of point to that. And it's like, I want to write a book about that, but I also want to create some kind of anthology, a horror anthology, because I've realized that again, speaking about metal, speaking about gothic, speaking about that kind of, the shadow, the dark and stuff like that. And like the idea of the monster, and how I vividly remember, like, why is Frankenstein a bad person? Or why is any character that's said as a villain is a bad person? And I remember asking this before the whole Killmonger was right kind of thing. I like, as a kid, I should say, it's like, this doesn't make sense. Davy Jones was just a heartbroken guy, for example, or Commodus was just an abandoned kid. These films was like, they make sense to me, which obviously is a testament to the writing. But again, aside the question is like, isn't every villain essentially just someone that is either like left behind, or I don't know, like then when you start to learn about how villains become analogous for it's almost kind of like a release valve, a critical release valve, for a collective critical release valve, to be like, hey, using Killmonger, of course, it's like, hey, you want black liberation, but look, he killed his girlfriend, for example. He's a terrible person, and that which completely delegitimizes the idea of African autonomy or Black autonomy, or like even just the idea of like militarizing or giving weapons to fight for your own liberation. Like, yeah, that sounds legit, but look, he killed his girlfriend, and it's just things that just make him feel like So I'm like, oh, let me. I remember in Empire City when soundtracking that, and there was a really strong response to a story about using pig sounds to illustrate the police, but specifically there was in the last episode, Chenjerai narrates a moment where a Black man defends his girlfriend from being arrested, accosted, harassed from an undercover white officer. At this time, he didn't know he was a white officer, but this was at a time when killing a white person definitely meant that you're going to be lynched. And so, but then again, an officer, like, shit, that was not going to end well. But
Right.
there's a stabbing scene in there because he stabs him. That's what the narration says, and I did that. And there was this kind of like a wonderful blend between saxophone and pig squeal, and it was just like it was so but I was then essentially asked to turn it down. But I again asking questions. I was like, why do I need to turn it? Like, I swear, that this whole point of the series is to kind of like understand Black struggle and resistance here. Like, why is it so bad to hear a police officer being stabbed? And then it's just like, for me as a horror, it's just like, oh, why? Let me start using these institutions and things that like basically just to like scare us even more. It's like quite often it's like the boogeyman is a boogeyman because he's creeping under your bed. But isn't it scarier to actually see the police for what they are? And I think that's what I understood when writing Eche Homo. There was a lot in the research. The research essentially, the process was the same as doing a documentary. I just fictionalized it, which was essentially using the information and giving it to a made up person. But like, the truth is stranger than fiction, and actually the horrors are already here. Like, it's just not taken seriously because it happens to Black people.
Right.
So then maybe then I should just do the same thing, but let it happen to a white person, and then all of a sudden it's scary. It's like, okay, fine. And I think that's probably what I want to experiment on as a kind of simple thing. It's like, let these terrible things happen to white people and call it horror, and then have fun with that. I just want to have fun with. Do I want to see this?
Well, you said a lot.
Said a lot. So like, watch his face. Like, whatever I may have hesitated to say in a couple of years' time, you will hear it, and we can talk about it.
Right. Right. Okay, so I'm just going to ask, can you read something for us?
Absolutely. I want to read this excerpt from a mother tongue because it was a real-time realization. Like, when I was writing something and realizing, oh shit, this is what it was like. But it was up until that point, it was just a feeling, of recognizing of a feeling. But it did things afterwards when I put it to paper. But yeah, this is from a mother tongue. You know English because your parents traveled to its home, after pointing at a map saying, here we will settle, qualify, and improve our prospects. Heads down, we will survive. You know French because you and your family were born in the land where the French pointed on a map and said, here we will settle, Christianize, civilize, commercialize, to improve our prospects and thrive. And therein lies the problem. Your Blackness is English. Your Africanness is French. And neither are words your ancestors would have used to describe themselves. Meaning there was an import. Meaning there was an interruption. Knowing there was a violence at the end of ancient ways. Yeah, that.
Yeah. So powerful. Like, really.
Yeah, This is because that's it. French and English are the only two languages I know,
Right.
and that's so fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that one, yeah.
Yeah. Where can folks find you?
My website is probably the best place right now. So axelkacoutié.com. Instagram's the only vice that I have right now that I use. And yeah, even then it's just the Instagram stories. But yeah, it's the same thing.
Well, this was such a huge pleasure. I am so happy that I get to meet you and actually talk to you, converse with you. I mean, I wish it was much longer. I think we can talk for many hours, honestly.
Definitely.
But yeah, I know you're up really late. What is it, like, what, 1 o'clock there now?
It's coming up to 2, but
2.
honestly, this is now my bedtime anyway. This is the rhythms of life just means that this is the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been a real joy. And thank you for allowing me to yap for as much as I have.
Yes. Of course.
No, it's good.
Thank you once again,
Thank you.
Axel. Thanks for listening to When We See Each Other. I'm your host, Nikkiesha McLeod. This show is produced and edited by Jeremiah McVay. If you like what you hear in the show, please rate and review it in Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that allows that. And please follow us wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. Doing so helps us to expand our audience and is much appreciated. You can find more information about this show at stereoactivemedia.com/whenweseeeachother. And you can get in touch with us at stereoactivemedia@gmail.com. Also, follow us on Instagram and TikTok under the handle WWSEO Pod. Talk to you later.
This podcast is produced by Stereoactive Media.